Hi, this is Muho again. I received another email from Brian Toria, and he's asking me to clarify 2 points. First, why I think that Sawaki Roshi is wrong, and the second, if I think that Brian and myself agree on Sawaki or if we disagree. The other day I uploaded 3 videos in which I tried to clarify exactly these points, so I'm sorry if I didn't succeed, and today I will try to do it better. First, about why I think Sawaki Roshi is wrong. The first of these reasons might not be so important to most of you who watch these videos, and maybe also not so important to Brian, but it is one important reason why I think Sawaki is wrong. It's a philosophical reason. I think the argument that Sawaki Roshi uses, basically that the whole of the universe is one and our own individual actions cannot be separated from the universal force. This resembles in a way a philosophical argument that is often made, for example, when there's a discussion about freedom. The question, are we as individuals free or not? And a lot of philosophers today say we're not free. Freedom is an illusion. For example, if I raise my right hand now, it's not that I did it because I decided to do so. But the decision was also already made, and the thought, oh, now I'm going to raise my right hand. You see, I did it. That thought in itself also, it occurred before I could even make the decision. The perception we have of a subject that is free to make decisions at will is just an illusion. The argument that these philosophers use is basically that everything in the universe happens for a reason. It's all determined by causality. Everything is determined by causes, and our brain is no exception from that. So we might not know if it's raining tomorrow, or if that will be sunshine, or let's talk about in 3 weeks. We have no idea if it's going to rain in 3 weeks or be sunshine in 3 weeks. But whichever. This is determined by natural causes, and it's the same with our brain. What I'm going to do in 3 weeks, I might not know it now, but I'm not the one who determines that. It's all determined by natural causes. Everything in the universe is determined by natural causes. I'm not an exception to that. And others disagree for one reason, because, well, it just feels so much as if I'm free. I mean, I'm the one who raises this hand, am I not? It feels, nothing is forcing me in this moment. That's a kind of weak argument, because even if it feels like that, it could still be an illusion. The other argument is more of a practical nature. It says, well, wouldn't that eliminate all sense of responsibility? If we have no freedom, we have no responsibility, it would mean that we can do whatever we want. And that shouldn't be the case. We should be ethical, responsible for our actions. So as persons, we should be responsible, therefore we must be free. That also, kind of from a logical point of view, is a weak argument. But still, I think there's a lot of philosophers, I don't know, maybe the majority today would agree that there's no freedom in the traditional sense. But there's also at least a number of philosophers who still say, well, there is freedom, there must be freedom. And regular people like myself, and probably most of us who watch this video, even though we might not have a strong philosophical position on this point, our day-to-day lives, we live as if we were free. We might not be able to prove that we're free, but we might think about, well, what will I have for dinner tonight? What am I going to do tomorrow? Just as if we were free to make the decision. So now, where do these two philosophical points of view disagree? I think it's easiest to illustrate when we think about parallel universes. Let's suppose there were 1 million parallel universes to our universe. The deterministic philosopher who says there's no freedom would say that each of these universes must look exactly the same way, because at no point could one universe be different from another, because everything in each of the universes from the Big Bang to the Big Crunch must develop in the exact same way. While the philosopher who supports freedom would say, well, actually each of these universes will look different, because at some point people, even if nature develops in the same way, people will act different. History is going to be different. But we do not have the possibility to compare our universe to parallel universes. So we cannot decide which of the philosophers is right by making a comparison to an imaginary parallel universe. So what difference does it make for our actual lives if we are free or we are not free? How do these two philosophical standpoints disagree when it comes to this universe? And it seems obvious to me that actually they do not disagree at all. They actually say the same thing, that they do not disagree about the past. One philosopher might say we're responsible for the past. We did what we did in the past because we chose so. The other says, well, we had no other choice, but it doesn't change the past. One of the philosophers says, well, it's up to us to decide the future. The other says, well, what happens in the future is already decided now. Still, it doesn't make a difference for me now if I'm free or not, because if I'm free, I'm gonna live just as I always lived, because I always lived thinking that actually I'm free, that I make whatever decision I make it deliberately. If I'm not free, again, it would be a contradiction in myself if I say I'm not free, so from tomorrow I can do what I want. I'm not free, so tomorrow I don't have to get up at 3:45 in the morning. I can sleep until noon, and nobody can blame me for that because I'm not free. The mistake I'm making if I do that is I say I'm not free, but then I use that as an excuse to make a deliberate decision, to be lazy, for example. Or I could say, there's no freedom, so criminals can't be blamed for their crimes. There's no responsibility, there's no need to feel guilty, so I could go ahead and kill whomever I want. It's not my responsibility. Again, I would use the idea of having no freedom as an excuse to make a deliberate decision. If I have no freedom, and if you ask me for my philosophical point of view, I actually agree that it's very unlikely that as human beings we have any such thing as individual freedom. But if that's the case, it means that when we think, we have no other choice than to think, what should I do now? If we feel responsible, then natural causes have determined us to feel responsible. If we feel guilty for what we do or for what we did in the past, that's how nature works. So determinism doesn't excuse us from thinking each moment, what should I do, and feeling responsible for that. And the same thing is the case in the argument that Sawaki Roshi says. I think I think there's no problem with saying the whole of the universe is one. We're all living a universal life, the life of the Buddha. But that can never be an excuse from saying, well, then I just do what I want to do or what I feel I have to do, and I don't have to worry anymore. If you feel that, oh, this is maybe wrong, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, maybe the whole of society is going in the wrong direction, and maybe I shouldn't follow there, that is also the voice of the Buddha there. And Sawaki Roshi seems to say in the texts we're talking about that, well, just follow along. If a bomb is thrown, it's thrown by the precepts. So first, I think Sawaki Roshi is making a kind of, on the metaphysical level, he's making a mistake there. There's something wrong with the logic. Also, on the ethical level, and that's, I think, what matters to most. I think, well, obviously today now we know that what was going on there in the war wasn't right, and that Sawaki Roshi should have spoken out louder against what is happening. But then I'm disagreeing with Brian that Sawaki Roshi is actually a loud supporter of the war, but rather he's at a time where I'm surprised that it was actually possible to put such things into print. He's saying this war isn't fought in the right way. People, that there's crime going on, the precepts are broken. He's saying that yeah, very clearly it's people are breaking the rules there. Of course, we could today, now living in the 21st century, not living in a country that is at war at present, we could kind of, it's easy to sit back and say, well, he could have done more. Yeah, I do not think that what he said is right, that his actions are right, but also I do not feel in a position to criticize him. And I don't know what I would have done in his situation. I doubt that I would have had more courage than Sawaki Roshi had in that situation. And I actually, yeah, I'm surprised reading the texts we're talking about in context about what he said, how far he went. In 1940, 1941, 1942, there must have been censorship. I doubt that what he said or wrote was put into print unedited. So even after editing, these texts seem to be very critical of the war machine that was going on at that time in Japan. Another point that I disagree upon with Brian, and I talked about it in the previous 3 videos, is Brian seems to point his fingers at Sawaki and others, and in our exchange 7 years ago, at one point he said, I can't understand how an ordained monk, freshly ordained monk, goes to war. In the case of Sawaki, it was the Russian, the war with Russia, the Russo-Japanese war, and breaks the 10 grave precepts. How is that possible? So he's using the Buddhist precepts, the precepts which were laid down by Shakyamuni and then later transmitted and kind of given to us at the Soto ordination through the tradition of Dogen Zenji. He's using the names of Shakyamuni and Dogen Zenji and their precept as an argument to argue that Sawaki Roshi was actually not a good Buddhist, maybe not a Buddhist at all. And that's why I bring up the topic of being married, because if you use the same standards and judge me, for example, or Brian, you would also have to reach the conclusion we are not good Buddhists, because I do not see that at Shakyamuni, neither Shakyamuni nor Dogen at any point said, well, killing a human being is absolutely bad. Compared to that, marrying and having children is still okay. He never said that. If you ask me for my opinion about is it okay to have a family, well, I wrote about it in the articles. I wouldn't go so far to say, well, there's no problem with that. But I certainly think it's better than killing people. And to a certain degree, I agree also with the point of view of saying, well, today we live in the 21st century. It's not the time of Shakyamuni. It's not the time of Dogen. I'm living in Japan, but I'm a Westerner. There's different cultures coming together. There's different necessities today. having a family but still being a priest. Why not? It's a new challenge. It's a different challenge, but we're facing different challenges today than Shakyamuni and Dogen Zenji. If that's the point of view of Brian, then I agree with that to a certain degree at least. But if you take that point of view and say, we're living in 21st century, today different rules apply than at the time of Shakyamuni and Dogen Zenji, then I do not see how you can point your fingers at people who lived 120 years ago, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, and say, hey, look at these guys, they're breaking the precepts of Shakyamuni and Dogen. I think you can't have it both.